guys are going first. It doesn't look like you're walking behind us.
so great.
I'm glad you're running because now we're no longer a non-female team.
I know.
That's
But we're also a non-male team at the same time.
You're welcome.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Diversity.
Diversity.
Edward, question. How do I pronounce the indigenous? I don't want to mess it up.
Mrs. Huron Wendat. You're asking me as my sick role?
No, I'm not. I'm just asking.
I'm gonna follow.
This is getting on the mic. Okay.
Huron Wendat, Mississauga of New Credit, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee. Okay.
I've always said Haudenosaunee. Like,
And then Cataraqui?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We have a lot of time.
Well, our Indigenous Initiatives lead is up there.
Okay, well, I better nail this. Otherwise, I might get decapitated. But like, you know.
And also like all my math boring.
I wonder what equity questions they'll be asking this time. They're always.
They're always.
Always. Not as dull, not that that's happening. It's just like silly.
Okay, what time is it? Okay, we'll wait for Jana and Elsa to come back.
Yeah, SLC on the weekend. But then also on Monday, I have SLC for reality.
Excited?
I think it'll be a blur.
Yeah.
I think it will be.
That's usually how these things go.
Because 3 minutes is nothing when you're up there. As you may know, as you know, Tom.
It's fine, it's fine.
I saw Caroline
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Alma Mater Society Executive Election Debate. Before we begin, I would like to start the night with a land acknowledgement. Okay. So we acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, Mississauga of the New Credit, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, known as Cataraqui, or colonially as Kingston. The Alma Mater Society at Queen's University seeks to recognize the importance of these lands to the Indigenous peoples who have existed since time immemorial. The unjust acquisition of these lands occurred through the Crawford Purchase of 1783, a land treaty upheld by the First Peoples but later undermined by the British Crown and the Canadian government. This history of numerous broken promises and treaties continues to impact Indigenous communities today. As settlers on this land, we acknowledge our continued benefit from systemic structures that marginalize Indigenous peoples. Recognizing systemic oppression, it is our duty to actively listen to and amplify Indigenous voices, addressing both past and ongoing injustices for meaningful, positive change. We are grateful to these lands for sustaining us and giving us the gift of life. This acknowledgement is a call to action, committing us to understand and respect the history, ongoing struggles of Indigenous peoples. We recognize the words alone are not enough. Our actions must reflect our commitment to justice and reconciliation. As a branch of the society that strives to connect student leaders and facilitate positive change in student advocacy on Turtle Island, we strive to maintain the core values and teachings from Indigenous peoples. As the Secretariat Office facilitates this here, as settlers on the stolen land, we must continue to educate ourselves and strive to decolonize every layer of our governance system and curricula, and to indigenize our learning. So with that in mind, we can start the debate process. I'm Rachel, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Alma Mater Society Secretariat, overseeing the Internal Affairs Office. Alongside me are the Civic Affairs Officers.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm Alexander, and I'm the Chief Electoral Officer.
Hey everyone, my name is Mirwaj. I am the Chief Returning Officer for this term.
And tonight, the three of us will be moderating this debate. So leading up to last night, the Civic Affairs Officers made a form available where students could submit questions for each executive position. The elections team reviewed the questions and determined a set number of questions to ask the candidates, that being 5 per position. Candidates are not permitted to ask each other questions, and any questions during the debate must be stated by an elections officer. On the screen, there is a QR code. You may scan to submit questions live for the audience question period at the end. The order of speech will be in the reverse order of the ballot of the executive positions that were ratified by Assembly. So for Vice President University Affairs, we will have Edward going first. Afterwards, Avery will speak to Vice President of Operations. And lastly, for the President position, we will be starting with Dreyden and then Alex. So if moving on to the rules, the order of the executive candidates will be VPUA, VPOPs, followed by presidential candidates. The order of presidential candidates will follow the order ratified by the election ballot. The order will remain for the duration of the predetermined questions as well as the audience questions. So each individual will have 3 minutes to open and 3 minutes to close, as well as 3 minutes to answer each question. A 5-minute intermission will take place between predetermined questions and audience questions, as well as a break between VP Ops and presidential candidates for food. Prior to the debate, members of the AMS will submit questions for the candidates, as well as have an opportunity to submit them throughout the debate using the same form. I serve the right to select questions, and questions will be added only if time remains. So it's up to 3 questions per candidate. A candidate has the option to ask the speaker, the CEO or CRO, for a rebuttal. So a maximum of 1 rebuttal will be allowed per person on any question. The candidate will have a maximum of 1 minute, 30 seconds to respond to the question. The rebuttal can only take place after the primary question has been answered by both candidates. Rebuttals can commence only after a candidate asks the speaker for a point of order. at which time the speaker will permit the question. Debates will be published on the AMS webpage, and it will be live streamed / recorded by the AMC. Disrespect, heckling, and personal attacks will not be tolerated, so I have the right to dismiss a candidate from the debate if behavior warrants, as well as anybody from the audience. I will now pass it over to the CEO and CRO.
All right, so now we'll get started with the Vice President, University Affairs, candidate Edward Tsai. Edward, you may now give your opening statement.
How do you disconnect this? All right, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very cold evening. My name is Edward Tsai. I use they, he pronouns, and I'm running to be your AMS Vice President, University Affairs. Now, a little bit about myself. I'm from Mississauga, Ontario. I came to Queens, and I'm now studying health sciences. I started my first year getting involved with a lot of different clubs and different communities because, like many of you, I wanted to find a place of belonging here. I joined in clubs like Queen's Debating Union. I also started working at the Yellow House as a receptionist and event programmer. From those experiences, I became a little more involved and passionate about doing equity work, so I applied to be the Health Sciences Society IEDIA Commissioner. From that role, I led and directed things like the first ever equity gala that has now transformed into Threads. I championed focus groups for equity and accessibility, which has now turned into a multi-year research project that I'm conducting with the Faculty of Health Sciences to produce a training module for faculty. I also became a residence don because, like many folks, housing and food costs are really expensive, and I do not have the financial supports to, fill those gaps. So I also found a lot of opportunity there, mentoring students, creating events. A lot of these experiences then led to me applying to the current position I have as the AMS's Social Issues Commissioner Internal, where I championed institutional equity work across both the AMS, the university, as well as interacting with various governance levels. On the corporation side, I've done things like the AMS Culture and Equity Survey for the first time to help build a better workplace environment for all 1,000+ staff and volunteers that we have. I've also created the first ever equity working group within the board of directors so that we're having ongoing dialogue around equity issues. On the society end, I've helped countless initiatives and events alongside the Social Issues Commissioner external, such as Threads, Queer Orientation, the Indigenous Strengths Mural. I also helped with I represented over 21,000 students on I think over 15+ university committees, ensuring that every voice is brought to the table in a way that is diverse and that empowers all students at Queen's. All those experiences kind of shaped the way I wanted to approach my university life as someone who is curious and always willing to learn, as someone who is empathetic and there to champion and empower other students, as well as someone who is creative. I love digging into problems and making long-term change, and that's what led me here today, running to be your AMS Vice President, University Affairs.
All right, thank you, Edward. We'll now get into the questioning phase. The first question. The Commission of Environmental Sustainability currently receives the smallest allocation from the Assembly. Do you believe this disparity is justified? And do you have any preference for how commissions should be prioritized in future allocations?
I think that the core issue that this question is talking about is how AMS determines its priorities. Now, I've worked in the AMS for about a year now, and I think there's lots of different opportunities for us to better understand where students want us to put our money towards, whether that's environmental sustainability, equity work, campus affairs, or the variety of other things that the VPUA does and that our assembly allocation funding goes to. At the end of the year, the outgoing and incoming executives facilitate a survey, trying to understand where our priorities are and what student concerns are. And I think sustainability has always, year by year, been one of the top 3 priorities that students want to engage more. I think that there's so many opportunities for the Commission of Environmental Sustainability to show up to students in ways that many students honestly don't really see, such as with saving money using things like the collective closet or the Eco Hub as well, or Green Innovations. I think that with the justification of the budget is a very hard thing for me to say at the moment. I think I've done my consultations with the current Commissioner of Environmental Sustainability. They've had lots and lots of ideas on how to expand this, and I think sitting down throughout the summer and throughout the transitionary period with the outgoing team to determine where our goals and priorities are, collaborate on developing a budget together. I think that's where we're seeing our how we'll determine our budget for the next year. There are also a variety of different initiatives that I want to help champion that help give more students avenues to shape how the AMS shows up for you. For example, an advocacy town hall where students can bring up concerns around environmental sustainability, such as Queens, whether they divest from fossil fuels, or how I don't know the exact name of it, but the Sustainability Office conducts its work. I think that with the CES, or the Commission of Environmental Sustainability, there's lots of potential to explore because sustainability is embedded into every single portfolio. So even if the CES does not receive, the essential fundings it needs, which a lot of times is by the discretion of the VP operations, I think there's so many chances for there to be greater collaboration between the commissions and providing more funding, such as, the Social Issues Commission does things like the Indigenous Medicine Walk, collaborations where we can chip in and commit ourselves towards sustainability across the entirety of our corporation.
Thank you, Edward. Our next question. Given Ontario's 42% reduction in international study permits for 2026, international undergraduate students face increased barriers to admissions. What steps would you take to ensure international students on campus are fully integrated into campus life and supported by AMS?
I think the question is complex for me to provide a concrete answer on because I'm not an international student, but that by no means states that I am unable to be an ally, to be a champion for international students at Queen's. For the AMS to show up for international students, first, we need to understand those issues. So creating more avenues for there to be feedback, whether that is directly to the AMS or towards the university, AMS often being that bridge towards those institutional decision makers. I think that we need to first gain the trust of international students so that we can be that champion for any of the issues that international students are facing. I think one of the things that I want to see come into fruition this year is a public progress tracker, specifically when it comes to advocacy goals. Lots of times students bring up concerns, but they don't really necessarily go to the right people or they just disappear. When I think of the international students and how AMS could be supporting them, I want there to be more feedback avenues directly to the services or resources that we provide. I know Campus Affairs Commission this year has really done an amazing job expanding the International Affairs Office or Research Center, forgetting the exact name at the moment, but that's a relatively new thing that has come into fruition in the past 2 years. And I think evaluating where it's standing now, seeing how its mentorship programs and what resources and information it's providing to its students, and whether that's actually meeting what these international student concerns are, that's where I think the VPUA really steps in to understand where AMS should be putting its funding towards. one of my campaign pillars is community, and I want there to be more opportunities for people to come together, especially when international students coming into campus. A lot of them come from another country. This is their first time being in Canada. I can't imagine how frightening or an anxiety-inducing that might be. I think that having an AMS that is approachable, having, for example, clear office hours for the VPUA or for the Campus Affairs Commission, I think is one step forward where we can bridge that gap, because I think community, especially with the rising costs for international students as well, a lot of these issues are basic human rights, and I want to be a champion of those human rights, of addressing or supporting students who are navigating housing insecurity or food insecurity or equity-related issues. The AMS is here to support you, and oftentimes there's that mistrust there that I want to affirm and show up for students.
Thank you, Edward. Our next question. Through the government affairs portfolio, what are your plans and approaches to externally advocate for student needs at the municipal level, the provincial level, and federal level?
I think one of my biggest plans for our external affairs portfolio is to ensure that the average student is empowered and educated on what's happening at the various levels of government or within the AMS, and how we're showing up for you folks at the municipal or provincial, federal levels. Our Commission of External Affairs sits on the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance alongside the VPUA to represent our 21,000 students and to collaborate with other campus student unions as well, and present that coordinated front. The unfortunate fact, though, is that we've seen a bit of a decrease, or from my perception, a lack of engagement, especially as it pertains to those USA delegates. There are so many opportunities for students to get more involved, for students to make sure that their voice is heard at such a high level, because the AMS can only really represent what we know, and we need to have those avenues where, for example, as I mentioned, that advocacy town hall where we're coming together and collaborating on solutions is the first step to that. I also want to build more cross-university relationships as well. We're not just meeting to talk about policy papers we're writing, but also a quintessential services that many university campuses share. For example, peer support centers or menstrual equity projects. These all exist at various different forms across multiple universities, and I think establishing a community of practice amongst a lot of our student unions enables us to have ongoing discussion beyond just the few times we might meet for the USA General Assembly or for Lobby Week. I also want to circle back once again. I think having that progress tracker webpage really helps address a lot of these uncertainties around, how am I going to show up for environmental sustainability? How am I going to support international students? How am I going to ensure that I best represent students at multiple government levels? I think firstly, once again, trust is one of the largest issues that we face here at this university, mistrust specifically, that students don't know where to go or don't trust the system enough to provide their feedback. And when we have such huge problems such as food insecurity or tuition costs that honestly the university isn't controlling, one particular person isn't controlling, I think our student voices as a collective is much more powerful than me singularly as VPUA. I want to be that empowering person that students have the resources and education to directly put their voice forward. It's not just always on the AMS, because once again, 100 emails is much more than one from me.
Thank you, Edward. The next question. Bounce was introduced at the start of the year and has recently been used for clubs to submit events for approval. What are your plans to improve the club experience and streamline the event sanctioning process?
thank you for that question. Over the past 2 weeks, I've conducted over 47 consultations with a variety of student leaders, from faculty, society executives to club leaders. And bounce and club ratification, club resources, all of those issues keep on coming up as something that the AMS should improve on. I know this past year there's been so many changes towards these processes that are meant to be accessible for students. And the unfortunate reality is that the way that the system is set up at the moment doesn't seem like it's listening to those student voices and implementing them in ways that students can see. My plans to support clubs and support event sanctioning is firstly by making these processes simpler and making more educational resources for students to understand these seemingly complex processes, even though they really shouldn't be, because the AMS should be helping club leaders as they're creating more community. This would look like regular weekly office hours with the Clubs Commission, Campus Affairs Commission, but also the Vice President University Affairs. I want there to be continuous avenues where we're sitting down with students and hearing what your problems are so that we can actually effectively address your concerns. I also plan to take a bit more of a research approach to this as well. Being a bit of an academic, I think that I foresee the first few months of my term really focusing on evaluation and auditing. As I mentioned before, there's been so much change in the AMS over the past year that we really need to sit down and figure out what's been effective. And bounce, I think, has been one of the largest issues that I've been hearing. On top of that as well, I want to be able to show up for clubs in many other ways beyond just the administrative processes, not just the the administrative barriers that the clubs on a bare minimum have to do, or more so the AMS on the bare minimum has to show up for. I want to create things like more coordinated discounts, sponsorships, and giveaways with our local businesses and all other companies as well, because I've seen time and time again that clubs are getting sponsorships from restaurants like Tommy's, for example, when it would be, I think, a much more efficient and much more community way of AMS kind of collating, synthesizing, bringing these sponsorships in one place together so that club leaders can see and access these resources. I also want to develop a flow chart or map on these processes as well, because club ratifications, student activity fees, there's so much of these processes and knowledge that get lost in transition, whether that's within the AMS or for clubs as well, and I want there to be a continual baseline amount of knowledge for students to access and understand our systems.
Thank you, Edward. And for our last question, given the AMS's constitution's commitment to addressing historical and systemic disadvantages and striving for a discrimination-free environment, what specific measures would you, as Vice President University Affairs, take to mitigate unfair advantages and stereotypes you see across campus?
See, that's just a really loaded question. I've tried to spend the last 9 months of my term as the Social Issues Commissioner Internal trying to understand how do we, change the culture here at Queen's. Coming as a marginalized student, racialized, disabled, queer, I've seen the countless stereotypes and discriminatory acts that students may conduct towards each other, sometimes unknowingly or sometimes knowingly, and similarly as well in our interactions with the system or with faculty or with staff. My plan to address a lot of these historical, systemic oppressions begins with a change management theoretical approach where we have to look at the bigger picture and develop a plan. Currently, the AMS, in our principles and positions policy, as well as our equity policy, has broad overarching commitments to equity, diversity, inclusion, indigeneity, etc. But in no way does students, or even myself having been that commissioner, have an idea of that clear action plan and strategies towards collaborating with folks in university administration, such as the VP Equity or with the Student Affairs, to address a lot of these systemic issues. I want, once again, that focus on inclusion and have more direct pipelines between concerns to direct advocacy and solutions. I've had that experience within residents as well, being a residence Don and also the Don representative on the Residence Advisory Committee. I've championed and advocated for the first equity and trust questions in the resident satisfaction survey. I've had students come up to me and are like, hey, in Morris Hall, we don't have a door to our washroom. But being a student leader means recognizing that you have some of those spaces to bring up these concerns. And now, guess what? They have a door. Basic things like that, I know it might not address, or it does address the larger systemic oppressive issues, but I think when it comes to our student body today, showing up in those little ways, creating spaces such as the Yellow House where students can come to rest and to feel empowered, those are the small things that create the framework and the supports for all the incredible advocates we have on this campus to champion change, make their voices heard, and shape those systems. I always say this, and you'll see this a lot of times in my campaign, that students have so much power but don't recognize it. Someone sent in a form the other day that they wanted bidets. I said that in an email to the Dean of Student Affairs, and she said, yup, let's get bidets. It's these small things that make a huge difference for equity-deserving students to feel more comfortable, more heard, and more seen by the AMS institution.
Thank you, Edward. Before you go, we'd like you to give a brief closing remark.
Thank you for all those questions, and thank you for all of you for listening to all my answers. I want to take a second to firstly thank my entire campaign team who have put countless hours towards supporting me. Some of you I see in the audience as well, or some of you who also show your support through other ways as well, reposting, even saying hi and checking in on me. Those are meaningful things that I really, truly value. I also want to express why I'm running for VPUA as well. I was honestly surprised not to see that question asked to me, but I do want to circle on that because I want to tell students that, once again, systems in place at the moment don't seem like they work or seem like they can be trusted. I want students to know that student leaders, the AMS, we're supposed to be there to support you. You fund us. If you don't want to fund us, you don't have to fund us, right? And when it comes to how your voice shows up at the table, there are so many avenues that I hope to be able to create more educational resources so you know how to make your voice brought to the table. I also want to make community and belonging a student right, not something you have to fight through so many jungle vines to find. That's why I think my pillars with accountability, community, and efficiency, with the goal of acing your student experience, I feel like that resonates with my idea of what the AMS and Queen's University should be doing moving forward. I also want to take some time to reiterate the importance of voting. The AMS, like many other governments, is a democratic system. We're there to represent your voice. As VPUA, I would have to directly report to Assembly. Assembly tells me what my goals and priorities should be. And I think that oftentimes votes might fall down as like one number out of thousands, but that one number can make a huge difference in shaping what not just next year looks like, but decades down the line. The impacts of vice presidents as well as presidents from decades ago, I still hear their names popping up in casual conversation or on the walls of JDUC, and I want to ensure that the students here today, have that chance to put their voice in. Thank you all for taking the time. I don't know if I'll be able to say this at the end, but I hope you all get home safe. It's a chilly season. And yeah, voting is on January 28th. follow my Instagram, ed4vpua, for more details. You can find a lot more about my pillars and platforms and lots of fun, cool videos coming out soon. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Edward. We would now like to direct the questioning to I am so sorry.
Hello? Hello? Thank you, Edward. I just want to reiterate before we continue to please submit some questions. We would like to hear your voices, the audience voices. So we're looking forward to your questions. Just please scan the QR code on the screen. Thanks again, Edward.
All right. Now for our Vice President Operations candidate, Avery. Oh, there goes unnamed person. Definitely not John Amir. Avery, your opening statements, please.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Avery Papoulidis, and I'm running to be your next AMS Vice President of Operations. A little bit about me is I'm in my 4th year of health sciences, planning to take a 5th year to endeavor in some more leadership positions and get more involved in the Queen's community. I'm from Niagara Falls, Ontario, from a very big family. I have 4 siblings and 3 pets. And I guess a little bit about my professional history. I've been consistently involved in student leadership, work, and service throughout my entire time at Queen's and even before. I've been working since I was 14 years old, which has really shaped how I approach responsibility, accountability, and showing up for the people that work for me. In my time at Queen's, I've been involved in various clubs. I've even helped start up 2 clubs, one notably being Proactive Minds, which is a mental health advocacy club on campus. And we run mental health workshops in the Kingston community. And you may have seen me around campus. I've had various jobs since I was in 1st year. I've worked at Queen's Libraries, I've worked at Grocery Checkout, and now I currently work as the Assistant Manager of Marketing and Events at Queen's Pub. So if anyone follows that Instagram, I am the face behind all of those videos and posts. But beyond my experience in marketing, being an assistant manager for the Queen's Pub has really allowed me to gain hands-on experience with operations, staffing, challenges in communication, and the realities of running a student-run service. Working within the AMS services has also strengthened my idea of what it means to be a good leader and has allowed me to see firsthand where AMS services support students and where they may fall short. My 3 pillars involve equal support for all AMS services, so all students feel supported, valued, not just the most visible ones. My second pillar is more student-focused, transparent operations, so students actually understand where their fees are going. And my third one is building a more connected campus and accessible AMS. I've seen how isolations between services, commissions, and faculty societies create unnecessary inefficiencies on campus. And these are just a few things that I would like to change. So overall, if it weren't for my work at Queen's Pub, I would not be standing in front of you all today or running for this position. I'm running because I care deeply about how AMS services are supported, how financial decisions are made and communicated, and how students experience the AMS as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Avery. All right, now on to our questions. What changes, if any, would you make to the current operational structure of the AMS to improve efficiency or responsiveness?
I think this is a great question, and I think that this has definitely been really under the microscope, the way that the AMS services work, how the commissions work, especially in light of the current deficit that I'm sure we all know about. One thing that I really like that I have an advantage with in student government, there's a turnover every year. And while this can be seen as inefficient, it also allows student leaders to start from scratch. So this means sitting down with our general manager, with our controller, with the commissions, and with the services to understand the costs, really understanding what is essential, what are our wants, and what are our needs, and kind of finding a middle ground about how to proceed. I think another really advantageous and you know what I mean, part of this position is, especially going into next year, a big advantage is having real numbers. So how did moving to the JDUC affect revenue of our services? How did our new services like the Brew and Queen's Pub actually perform financially compared to our projections that we made at the beginning of the year? So although I don't have this information as of right now, I think it's important to really have these conversations and see how we can address the deficit that we're currently existing in. I think that another really important piece of this is increasing student engagement with our services. I know that it's known that the AMS has seen a 200% increase in engagement with our marketing and communications. This is, of course, a work in progress, and meaningful change does take years. And although I don't have all the answers, I do have a duty to do the best that I can. A $500,000 projected deficit is significant, and I think that students deserve to see a clear return for every dollar spent and understand where their student fees are going in a way that makes sense. So I think that looking at the structures of our current services, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, making goal plans about how to move forward is a super important piece to improve transparency and accountability within how our AMS is structured.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. On to the next question. Bill 33 expands provincial authority over how ancillary fees may be regulated and charged at universities and colleges, which could affect student-funded services and supports on campus. How do you see this legislation influencing student life at Queen's? And what role should the AMS play in responding to these changes?
This is a great question. Bill 33 is definitely a very pressing issue, especially when it comes to Queen's experiences on campus and how the student government operates. Right now, I think that one of the biggest challenges with Bill 33 is that we don't yet know what the final policies are and what the regulations are going to look like. The legislation sets the framework, but the details that actually affect how student fees and how student fees are used and how services operate are still being developed. Until we have that clarity, there's really only so much I can responsibly comment on. But what we should be doing, and what I will plan to be doing in my role as Vice President of Operations, is preparing for when these changes do take place. So this means meeting with Queen's leadership, like the Department of Student Affairs, making sure that we understand how the university is interpreting Bill 33 and how we are complying with the legislation. We've seen similar situations like this before, like with the Student Choice Initiative, where changes led to real cuts and uncertainty for student services. At the end of the day, the AMS did adapt, and we still have all of these amazing services that students use every day. We're going to have to go through this again. My priority in any scenario is to protect students, protecting essential services, protecting student jobs, and making sure we're operating in a way that continues to support students. Until any of the Bill 33 policies are finalized, my focus would be on preparation, compliance, and advocacy, and education, making sure that students know what Bill 33 is, how they can get involved in the community, get involved in advocating, making sure that they are up to date with all information, and making sure that this is done in a timely manner. So when the details are released, I want students to know about it right away. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you for that answer. If a popular AMS service is losing money, how would you decide whether to reform it, subsidize it, or cut it?
I think that a major piece of this is getting student feedback. And I think that also, again, going into the operations position next year, having real data, real information, I guess kind of quoting a recent journal article that came out today, I know that there's a lot of conversation around the sustainability of the Queen's Pub. This is not new. This is not new information. I work at Queen's Pub, so I feel like I give you a very honest, very transparent perspective of this issue. And I do feel like this is kind of where the question is coming from, if I'm being honest. One thing I really want to do is work away from being optimistic and working towards being realistic, while also, of course, incorporating the student voice in any financial decisions. What would they like to see from services? What programming is useful to them? How do they want their student dollars to be spent? I think with Queen's Pub, this is just, again, I'm speaking from experience. Going into this year, we're really committed to finding QP's space on campus. Where does it fit into campus life? And this being said, we're also dealing with a lot of competitors. I mean, you can go down to Chuck's, and you can get half price apps and $5 pints. How is Queen's Pub supposed to compete with that? And I think that gaining student feedback, looking at the real numbers from last year, our foot traffic, I think that our projections from this year were a little bit big. They were big. We had very high expectations going into this year with the pub's projected revenues. And now I can go into next year looking back, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, and we can make changes as we see necessary. I think that with Queen's Pub specifically, we're working on building tradition, providing a safe space for students to eat and drink on campus. And I think that we do need to be incorporating student feedback more, which as of right now, we are implementing surveys. So we've been going around campus, seeing students' perspective of the pub, and I think that this can be, although I'm speaking from my experience at the pub, I think that this can be expanded across all the services and commissions. I think that students really deserve to have more of a say, and they should be involved in the financial decisions more.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. With the tuition freeze ending in 2026 to 2027 and financial pressures expected to rise, how will you ensure AMS services and infrastructure are equipped to support students facing potential tuition hikes?
I think that the important thing that I see with the AMS in my research from other student organizations, especially with the rising cost of tuition, the one thing I would like to see is not increasing AMS fees. So as of right now, the AMS has one of the lowest student fees across all Ontario universities. I mean, ours is $72 a year. If we look at McMaster, it's $170. If we look at Waterloo, it's $270. If we look at Western, it's $430. These are estimates, but I think that an important piece of this is really advocating not to increase AMS student fees. I think that it's kind of out of our hands as far as tuition prices go, but advocacy is huge. And I think that the AMS is really working towards having these difficult conversations with high-ups at Queen's, whether they are receptive or not, continuously pestering them, continuously bringing up these conversations in assembly. I mean, we've seen that Queen's doesn't care the most about student opinions. We've seen this in Queen's investments. You know, how many times has the AMS had conversations with Queen's about divesting from, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Divesting from holdings linked to violations of human rights or from negative environmental impacts. We see that the Queen's doesn't really care that much. So what we can do as the AMS is control what we can, and this means keeping fees as low as possible. Also working with our services to make services more affordable. Something that I've been working on at the pub is decreasing the prices of our menu offerings. I've been working alongside our chef for quite a while, really advocating for students after hearing student feedback that the pub is too expensive. So we've actually went through every single menu offering and decreased the prices significantly. So I think that this shows how committed I am to ensuring that Queens is or the AMS, I should say, is as affordable as possible, especially in the current landscape of increased tuition, increased housing, increased grocery costs. I think that the one thing that we can control in my portfolio is the services and how the AMS charges our students for membership fees.
Perfect. And for your final question, with the rising living costs contributing to increased demand for food services like the food bank and the peach market, how would you ensure that these services remain accessible and sustainable for students in the long term?
Yeah, so I think that in my experience, I think that food bank and peach market are often overlooked services here on campus. I've spoken with Caroline herself, and although there have been a lot of improvements being made within food bank, they got a fee increase this year, which is huge, very helpful in offsetting the costs of inflation. I think that a big piece of addressing food insecurity on campus is really by increasing engagement with the food bank, and this comes from more marketing, more education. A lot of students don't even really know what the AMS is to begin with, but they don't know the offerings, and I think that the secluded location of the food bank is a good place to start. When I went to go to the food bank for my consultation with Caroline, I could not find that place for a good 10 minutes. So I think that proper signage, more marketing, more education is super important because students need to know what services are available for them. This is in the realm of food insecurity, but also all services and all commissions of the AMS. I also think that another piece that I was talking to Caroline about is the collaborations with other AMS services. We have more visible AMS services. You ask a first year, they probably know what CoGrow is, but do they know what the food bank is? That's probably a lot less likely. So one of my pillars is expanded collaborations across AMS services. I think that collaborating with our smaller, more forgotten about services like food bank is a great place to start. And I think that even building collaborations within the Kingston community, Caroline was telling me that a lot of communications with Queen Hospitality can be, they can butt heads a lot. There's a decrease in communication with certain corporations and nonprofit organizations in Kingston, like the Kingston Food Bank, for example. The communications there are really lacking, and I think that this is a place where student fees and increasing student fees towards services like food bank can really only go so far. I think we need to be looking more into grants and other sources of income that we can improve not only food bank, but some of our other organizations in the AMS as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. And now your closing statement, please.
Like Edward said, I'm very, very thankful for you all who came out today. This is a great crowd, and I know that AMS does see kind of a lack of engagement sometimes. So I'm hoping that we have some more joiners on the live stream as well. I've given a bit of a summary of my pillars and what I hope to see change in the AMS next year. But the one thing I really want to reiterate is that for me, this position isn't just about policies or meetings or budgets. It's really about the people. It's about the student staff who rely on support to do their jobs well. It's about students who want to understand where their student fees are going. It's about building systems that make sure the AMS feels welcoming, connected, and trustworthy. If elected, my focus will be on making sure every service feels heard and supported, that transparency is meaningful and accessible, and that collaboration becomes the norm rather than the exception. I want to help shift the AMS culture from reactive to proactive, from isolated to connected, and from vague to clear. I believe students deserve leadership that shows up consistently, listens to their concerns, and actually follows through. To put it simply, I don't lead from a distance. I think that my staff at the pub can really back me up on this, even though they can't be here today. I'm not the type of person who sits in an office, points fingers, and tells you what to do. I stand alongside the students that I support and that I represent. I think that this is super important, especially in the position of Vice President of Operations. I think we need more student feedback. We need more education. We need more financial transparency. From my conversations with students, they're very frustrated. They don't understand why there's a deficit. They don't understand where their fees are going. And this is something huge that I would really like to work on. One of my kind of goals for this year is to change the way that we are presenting our budgets and our financial information. Whether that's, I've been looking at other student government websites, and they actually have a page on their website that outlines where their student fees are actually going. I think this could be super important to bring into the AMS. Another conversation that I would like to bring into the spotlight is to move our budget presentations from December to earlier in the term. Our operating budget is done in the summer. I don't really see why it's being presented in December. That way we can use December Special Assembly as a way to reflect. We can use actual numbers that we do have at that time, and we can make a goal plan to move forward for the rest of the term. And most importantly, we can be transparent on these actuals and make sure that it's being presented to students in a way that they understand and in a way that's digestible to them, regardless if they have a financial background or regardless if they're in commerce. I think that everyone deserves an AMS that is trustworthy and supportive.
Thank you, Avery. I just want to say we have like a quick 5-minute break between Prez and Ops questions. So feel free again to submit any questions for the audience question period at the end. Yeah, thank you. Hello? Perfect. Okay. We have a little bit more pizza outside, so everyone, you can grab a slice and in 2 minutes be back for us to continue with our presidential questions. Thank you. Hello. Hi, everyone. Would you like to please take your seats again so we can begin with the presidential candidate questions? Thank you. So for our final question period, we will ask questions to both of our presidential candidates, Dreyden and Alex. So they'll both start off with opening statements, and then we'll have a question period with the pre-screen questions, and then finally close off with closing statements from the two, and then move on to our audience question period. Thank you.
We'll now start with opening statements from Dreyden George.
Sweet. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dreyden George. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a fourth-year economics and environmental studies student here at Queen's. And thank you so much for having me and being able to attend this debate tonight. And thank you so much for coming out. My experience at Queen's is largely what drives my motivation for this role. My experience, you may have seen me on campus through several roles in the AMS, including the Social Issues Commissioner, External, the Clubs Commissioner, and the Commissioner of External Affairs, as well as this year's Chair of the Board of Directors. I also have been able to be involved in many clubs in our community to be able to kind of engage in advocacy work here. So that includes Queen's Back in Action for the Climate Crisis, where I serve as the co-president for the past 2 years, as well as in clubs like Consensual Humans, Student for Literacy, and other clubs like the Queen's Conference on Indigenous Reconciliation. These experiences have largely driven me to 3 main pillars, which is affordability, transparency, and engagement. These I would like derive from my past achievements in my experiences. I hope to be able to amplify and continue the work I've been able to do. Some of my major achievements in my role is including being able to be at the busset negotiation table, where I was able to get the city to concede down $3.8 million over the value of the contract, saving about 24% reduction in the transit costs costed to students. Additionally, there was also the all candidates meeting that was organized for the provincial candidates within our election last year that I was happy to host and organize since pre-COVID. And as well, since pre-COVID, was reintroducing the general delegate application for all students within USA, and also reintroducing the resource centers. Additionally, in the time of Clubs Commission, I was able to bring an additional $30K for club grants, the club grants fee, and as well establish another position, and increase by 35% the MOU with the SGPS to make sure the SGPS is paying its fair share to the Clubs Commission so that the AMS students are not paying the bill. Additionally, some other examples is starting the AMS Awards Gala. That's an official event now. That was started back in my time at Clubs Commission as a passion project, which I was happy to start and is really happy to see continue. And additionally, the club's hiring fair. Within my time at the board chair, I've been able to statistically increase the productivity, attendance, and reporting of the board and its committees, and I've been enjoying the role there as well, and extremely grateful for the opportunity. How I would like to lead is majorly through passion, commitment, resilience, and dedication, and openness to students to collaborate and communicate with me as their president. I would also make sure that my ambitious goals have a tangible delivery, utilizing my past experiences and making sure to be transparent with students on how that's progressing. I thank everyone for their time in coming, and I look forward to the debate today. Thank you.
We now ask that Alex McArthur takes the podium for his opening remarks.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Alex McArthur. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm currently in my 3rd year of the Life Sciences program here at Queen's. So if you don't know what that is, I study a lot about how the human body works and how things interact with the body as well. And I'm running to be your next AMS president. I've had a wide variety of roles here on campus. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of serving on the AMS Board of Directors, and I've been the personnel chair since January of last year. I've really gotten a chance to work with our Human Resources Office, making sure all of our employee-facing policies are as equitable and accessible as possible. And I've also been the drum major since May of last year for Queen's Band. So if you've ever seen a ginger wearing a funny hat walking around campus, that was probably me. I'm really running on 3 main pillars here for my campaign, with the first being representation. I want to best represent students here on campus. I'm also running on a pillar of collaboration. I think every group here on campus really does want to make the student experience better here at Queen's, so we should be working together, not fighting each other while doing so. And my last pillar is transparency. Transparency really is a big buzzword that has popped up over the past few years, and it means many different things to many different people. So I want to make sure that the AMS not only is as transparent as it can possibly be, but working with the university so it becomes more transparent with its students. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, and I can't wait to have wonderful conversations with Dreyden here tonight as well.
Thank you, Alex. Our first question, why do you want to be the Alma Mater Society's next president? We'll start with Alex.
I want to thank you, Alex, for that question. So I've been involved with student government here at Queen's since the end of my first year when I was appointed to the board of directors. And I kind of got to see how the corporate side of the AMS works and been involved in every single one of its committees that the board has had over the past 2 years. So that's really given me an insight on how students interact with the AMS, as well as interacting with this, not only its services, but every single office and commission we do have here as well. I've also had the privilege of being an orientation coordinator for the Faculty of Arts and Science this past year, where I got to interact with over 300 leaders and over 2,000 incoming first-year students, and got to hear their experiences and become a safe place for them to come to, talk about anything they want. You know, I've heard everything from I miss my mom to this is an awesome place and I can't wait to spend the next 4 years here. So really those experiences have pushed me to jump in the running for AMS president. I want to make sure that Queen's is a better place for students not only next year, but over the next 5 to 10 years. I know the university is looking at releasing their bicentennial vision soon over the next year, making sure that students have a continued impact in those decision-making processes, as well as ensuring that that plan keeps getting revisited. A 15 to 20-year plan is a very long plan, and it's a very long time, so making sure that it's updated as it can be, as students have more and more input year over year.
Thank you, Alex. We now ask Dreyden the same question.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. Could you please repeat the question? Why would you like to be the next AMS president, right? Perfect.
Why do you want to be the Alma Mater Society's next president?
Thank you. The main reason I would want to be the next president, I think, is for my dedication towards trying to improve student outcomes, and specifically through things like their standard of living, through things like housing and food insecurity, and also the cost of living and how much we charge students as well through our services and our fees. I would like to be able to deliver on this, and what drives me to be able to want to be best fit for that role is through my experience and being able to kind of build on that. My time at Queen's, I've been able to definitely be really involved across a multifaceted approach for the AMS. Oftentimes, the president isn't going to be able to come in with half the commissioners working in as a manager of half the commissioners, as well as a chair of the board. At the same time, I also serve as my community's Economic Development Corporation president and chair, which is also a $10 million organization where we manage different services. So I feel like I can bring a very different perspective across governance, corporate, and the general connection tissue, which is the offices and the president's role. I think bringing that perspective, I can make sure not to sacrifice students' advocacy and desires for their representation, but also make sure to not increase the deficit, but actually reduce it, while also producing good investments for students that actually reduce daily cost of living. And I would also say, for lastly, what drives my role for the president is the dedication for resilience for students. So I think making sure that we are setting a culture that is proactively communicative and trying to be engaging and collaborative and open to every student on campus and every student body in churn, including FACSOCs and clubs. And so that's what drives my role to be, or my passion to be the next AMS president, and why I think I'd be best fit is I think I could deliver tangible goals on ambitious actions.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Dreyden. This next question is also for you. Queen's has recently developed its own artificial intelligence interface, LibreChat. The university notes that it can be used by staff and instructors to support and accelerate administrative tasks for uses in teaching, learning, and research, with all prompts and documents stored within Queen's domain. What is your stance on the university's adoption of AI, and what steps would you take to protect student data privacy?
Yeah, actually, this is a very good question. In my experience within the Commission of External Affairs, I got the chance to author the artificial intelligence paper for our provincial lobby organization, which is now currently going to be reviewed at this upcoming Winter General Assembly. In that, we actually wrote, I had the sections around responding to the legislation of the Ontario government right now around the responsible investment or the responsible use of artificial intelligence within provincial bodies, including public institutions. I think firstly, making sure that we're looking at that full policy and its use and seeing how it's compliant with the provincial regulations, but also also making sure to critique that policy in the same way we've critiqued the regulations. There's oftentimes common critiques and concerns around things like environmental sustainability, the use of the water and the impacts of use of AI, but also the impacts on our local economy here at Queen's. How is this impacting the professors and the faculty and the jobs that would be used to be doing those admin tasks? I think also making sure to balance it with that there is a role for AI in the future of technology, and especially within research capabilities, but making sure within our operations that we're being very careful and strategic and also very thorough in our research to make sure that security data, storage of information, and the cost of AI to our environment and our ethical principles is not too high and is actually mitigated. Additionally, with regards to the AI stance, I think for professors, I would be open to meeting with KUFA and their faculty associations to see what their stance is and see where the students' general opinion by doing student research and consultation can be better see where the alignment is and where there's conflict between the student opinion, the professors, and the administration, and how to best go about advocating that in a strategic way for students. Additionally, for the AI on the provincial end, I think it still is meaning to work with the VPUA and the Commissioner of External Affairs to also coordinate that cross-messaging and make sure it's consistent of what we're advocating and lobbying to the provincial and federal government and our municipal government, but also, of course, the university, most importantly. For artificial intelligence, I would finish off is that I do think there is a concern of an accelerated embracing of artificial intelligence with, as you mentioned, security data measures possibly being a bit too lenient and also not secure enough. We have a concern, obviously, well, I know from certain student consultations, is that, as we've seen, oftentimes Queen's professors and the departments can't actually maintain consistency across their own learning softwares like OnQ. So I would be concerned with their ability to enforce and apply consistent policies and outcomes and processes across all the professors in the university for an AI use as well. With that as well, I wouldn't say like the university is embracing quantum computing within all their classes as well. So I think there needs to be a reshifting and understanding from a financial end. If the university is investing into AI, that's also another concern for students as to make sure there's not an AI bubble forming, and that we're working with the investment managers of both the AMS, which is something that we've already done at the board level, but also advocating to the university to make sure to be cautious about it, as that is still made with student dollars. And that is all.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Alex, you have the floor.
I'm going to ask you to repeat the question because it was a long question.
For sure. Queen's has recently developed its own artificial intelligence interface, LibreChat. The university notes that it can be used by staff and instructors to support and accelerate administrative tasks for uses in teaching, learning, and research, with all prompts and documents stored within Queen's domain. What is your stance on the university's adoption of AI, and what steps would you take to protect student data privacy?
I want to thank you for that question. I think my stance on the university's integration of AI is they shouldn't be moving too fast. Obviously, they developed their own large language model to be able to assist them with the creation of LibreChat, which I think is important. The university does have their own, so we're not just sending off student data and student and professor syllabuses and research and things like that off to OpenAI or Oracle or other AI companies here in North America and across the world. I think, though, that one thing that they do need to do is not jump too far ahead, really understanding how professors are going to be able to use AI. I've talked to multiple of my professors, and they didn't even know LibreChat was a thing until it got announced in the Gazette, just like most students. So that's one thing. They really do need to be training their professors and their staff on how to utilize AI effectively and how Queen's can do that. Sort of working with the AMS or even the Faculty Association to create policies and training guides for not only students, but professors on how to use AI effectively. It's something that's not going away in our world, and we need to understand how to use it effectively and not be plagiarizing ourselves and not accidentally just saying false information that will sometimes happen with large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini and Perplexity AI as just some examples of those. To answer that second point, would I advocate for the protection of student data? I really do think that openness and transparency from the university on how they're storing that data is important. I don't really know how OpenAI stores its data or anything like that, and I don't think they're going to tell us how they do that. But one thing the university can do is say, this is exactly what we're doing with the data, this is how we're storing it, and this is how we're protecting your data, to make sure that students' work isn't being just sent off to random websites online so people can buy them to purchase for things and just say, oh, well, I wrote it, it's fine, it's whatever. let it be what it is. But then also professors having their data on there and those administrative things, making sure that students don't have access to other students' information as well is super important. If they're going to be doing admin things like grading or proofreading work or AI checking work as well, I think it's super important that students understand that they aren't going to be, like other students aren't going to be able to look at their work or know exactly how they're working and things like that. So students still remain autonomous while submitting work as well. I think that's super important. And lastly, I don't think the university should go all in, say everything is done by AI now, we're going to get rid of TAs. I think that's not beneficial to students as well. I think that my most favorite experiences in all of my classes has been interacting with my TAs. They've been able to give me hints on exams, been able to tell me exactly where I'm going wrong with problems, so I'm able to adjust my learning and make sure that I'm able to do that. If the university decides we're just going to move to AI, I think that's going to really negatively affect the outcomes of students here and the student experience here on campus.
Amazing. Thank you for that answer. All right, Alex, this question is for you. What is one university policy or structure at Queen's that you believe most needs reform? And what realistic leverage do you think the AMS has to address it effectively?
That's a really good question. And it's a very broad question, too. I think that there's multiple ways I could go about answering this question, but I'm going to answer it with the one that I think I have the most experience on, and that is orientation. I think the university's desire for orientation to be split up across 2 weekends is a great idea for students transitioning to school, but it also is hindering them. We see, as an orientation coordinator, we saw less and less turnout to events on the second weekend because students were already dealing with assignments. They were already working on homework problems. They felt like they were already swamped with 5 classes coming from high school taking 4, that they just couldn't handle the stress and coursework, so that they couldn't enjoy the events that they purchased a ticket to attend. So I think that changing that back to a week-long structure, we have an awesome opportunity to do it, and I'm sad the university isn't taking it this year. With Labor Day falling when it is this year, we're starting a school, I believe, on September 8th, I believe, which is a week later than we started this year. So we have an extra week of summer, but we could have utilized that time to transition students in to university and start classes on the same date. They've already gone through that orientation period. They've become comfortable at Queen's. They know where to access resources here on campus. So from the first day of class, they know exactly if they're having a problem in day 1, they can go to student academic success services to create strategies to help develop them that. I think the leverage that we have is we're one of the only universities where the student government does essentially facilitate and run orientation through the AMS and through its faculty societies as well. So utilizing the large amount of faculty society support that we could probably gain from something like adjusting the orientation timeline to better support students and student leaders. I know that the Faculty of Arts and Science had about 300 Gales this year who gave up their second weekend back here in Kingston after starting classes to assist in those transition and orientation activities. We have executive members in 3rd and 4th year who are taking time out of their weekends and taking time out of their summer to come back and plan these events. So making sure that we're not only giving back to those students, but we're also making sure that their studies are important, right? That's what their main thing here to do. They're not here to party or transition students. They're here to learn. So making sure that students feel supported in that is probably the best way I could do that. And leveraging that support to the university to help make that change.
Amazing. Thank you for that answer. Dreyden, you have the floor. I'll repeat the question for you. What is one university policy or structure at Queen's that you believe most needs reform? And what realistic leverage do you think the AMS has to address it effectively?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. My initial answer is going to sound unorthodox, but I swear as I explain my answer, it's going to make sense. The policy I would change is the alcohol policy of the university. As much as I do think we are here to learn and everything, I think it's a big inhibitor for FACSOCs and clubs and the AMS to be able to deliver on certain events that are actually going to be engaging, but while we're actually exercising safe consumption of alcohol. So this is from a harm reduction standpoint. I think that the university and the AMS has now lacked the ability to, because of the university has an inhibition on alcohol use within events, and specifically prohibits the use of even the tailgate permitting program that the Ontario government had passed, which is now being utilized by student unions across the province on being able to deliver things like the Panda Games. These are really important because what happens is if we don't have sanctioned and insured places with proper safety mechanisms like first aid and walk home and including like core and things like that, then it means that students are forced to have to go into house parties or host house parties or into street parties, or not necessarily forced, but definitely encouraged to over the safe consumption sites or possibilities of engaging in through a safe consumption manner. This also means then police officers are able to fine with AMPs, which is also a very dangerous thing as first-year students who, and typically with a higher probability for international students who are unfamiliar maybe with all of our laws, specifically are unaware on the impacts it has to also your degree and also, of course, your ability to study and work here in Canada. So that is a huge concern. I think largely overall it helps many different facets of the body from marginalized students, but also making sure we're saving students the hassle and disruption of being fined and also having to go to court to appeal these things, and making sure that the AMS has the ability to deliver safe events that actually allow for fun and engaging activities, and understanding that we are still actual adults and not 14-year-olds. So I think it's trying to advocate to the university to get with the program on the rest of the province's universities and seeing the successes from that, as every other university has shown that the data has helped with reducing the harm caused from unsafe consumption of alcohol in unsanctioned spaces without proper safety services provided. Additionally, I think for our leverage, to answer the latter part of the question, is the AMS has a great ability with connection to admin. So a big part is trying to make sure you're being strategic with who you're meeting with from the trustees committee that would be responsible for where you'd want to bring this policy to, and making sure that additionally you're gaining outside support and pressure. For example, the city council and community associations like the Sydenham District Association that represents the community around us and where we are living, and also is made up of a lot of Queen's alumni that are quite influential to the university, are all in favor of trying to adjust this policy and are actually against what the university is currently avoiding. So I think leveraging this and making sure to properly advocate to the university and show that we do need a change in the alcohol policy for the purpose of student engagement, but also making sure that the alcohol policy is still promoting a safe environment.
Thank you, Dreyden. Your next question is, given the Secretariat's central role in elections, judicial matters, and other autonomous governance processes, how should the President exercise oversight of the Internal Affairs Office while preserving its independence and integrity?
Thank you for the question. I think I do have experience with trying to make sure to balance the integrity of autonomy between bodies, both with having to be a commissioner and reporting to the assembly, and also working under the corporate side, of course, and reporting to the board, and then kind of seeing how that balances across bodies like the Journal Advisory Board, the Board of Directors. There are many committees, the committees between the assembly and the directors that the Internal Affairs Office has to look over, and in addition to the assembly itself. I think one of the goals I have is, under my transparency goal, is to improve the integrity of our student governance. As Edward mentioned earlier, we don't know what we aren't told, and also our integrity of representation heavily relies on the engagement of students in our governance processes, from voting to attending assembly to submitting your concerns to your FACSOC representatives to make sure that the committee work is actually relevant to the student concerns present. So being able to make sure to advance on that and building this Internal Affairs Office resources, looking at its structure, how it's staffed. For any historical fun reference is that after the Student Choice Initiative and going into COVID, the Internal Affairs Office is one of, at the time, 3 different offices that was conglomerated into one, which had a lot more internal staff support, and is where we've seen a decrease in engagement with our governance processes since then. Although we have seen increases year over year, there's only so much efforts without the actual resource support. Additionally, we would see that the Judicial Affairs Office oftentimes delays or has struggles with staffing and things like this. I think oftentimes at the Internal Affairs Office, we need a president that's just there to support and be there for the Secretariat and the Internal Affairs Office team, and making sure that the president trusts whatever the secretariat is doing and rules on or makes a decision on is in the best interest of the society, whether it's in the best interest of the president themselves. I think understanding and respecting that and making sure to abide by our Constitution, which is our founding document, I would say is definitely really important. Further, I would say for the judicial affairs process, it's also about being okay and open and receptive and proactive with engaging in that process if ever a student raises a concern towards the department of the AMS, a fellow student, or a VAC-SOC, et cetera. Making sure those concerns are resolved so that our society policies seem that they are actually enforced, as I believe that if people don't believe these policies are applied to everyone fairly, then people won't follow them or care to report when they are not being complied with. Additionally, I think I will leave off on is the Internal Affairs Office, in regards to respecting its autonomy, is making sure that when we are supporting the Internal Affairs Office, that I'm providing guidance more so in a direction of just being a leader and less so of trying to tell them necessarily how to write their policies and things like that, but we're relying on the governance process and better supporting them on how I can better get more student feedback for the Internal Affairs Office so that they are producing outcomes that are relevant to students' needs.
Thank you, Dreyden. Next up, Alex. Given the Secretariat's central role in elections, judicial matters, and other autonomous governance processes, how should the President exercise oversight of the Internal Affairs Office while preserving its independence and integrity?
I've thought a lot about this question because it gets asked every single year. But one of the ways that the president can support the Internal Affairs Office is by being their mentor. I'm not here to be the secretariat. I'm not ready to be the president to tell the Secretariat's office what to do. I'm here to help guide them and help make sure that they're feeling supported. Part of the president's job is being that direct report for the Secretariat and all the other offices. So ensuring that they're able to feel like they have a support system within them, but they're not micromanaging their activities here as well, which is super important for them to be able to do the work that they do. The Internal Affairs and the Civic Affairs team make sure that the AMS keeps running, that our elections are smooth, that if there is a judicial case that does get brought forward, it's answered quickly and it's answered in the most effective way possible. I'm not here to micromanage that office. I'm here to provide support, and maybe the Secretariat doesn't understand why a certain policy was written in a specific way. Within the past few years, being able to help provide that guidance, really looking back to our Constitution and our bylaws, allowing, seeing what the president is able to do in those cases will really support that team, making sure that it is semi-autonomous as well, making sure that not only the Secretariat but the rest of the Internal Affairs Office feels like they aren't being micromanaged or the president is watching over their shoulders at any time, really to make sure that those students in those rules feel like they are getting that experiential learning opportunities for running an election or a referendum or learning more about judicial case management and things like that, or even just the internal policy writing process within the AMS. We're not here to micromanage those people. We're here to support and guide them through that process and be a confidant or answer any questions that they may need along the way, which I think is super important. And it also comes back to working with our students and marketing what our Internal Affairs Office does do, letting students know that this is the process. If you do have a concern with an AMS department or a student here on campus or with the university, navigating those ways and making sure students understand exactly how they play also a role in the Internal Affairs Office is something that other departments across the president's portfolio are able to support them doing as well. So things like marketing campaigns about the election or marketing campaigns about hiring within the Internal Affairs Office, which I know the Internal Affairs Office struggles on hiring year after year since COVID, making sure that students feel like that these roles aren't scary and they're able to actually jump into those roles and get a very positive learning outcome out of them. So that's kind of my jumbled and long answer to that question.
Thank you, Alex. Your next question. The JDUC was reopened to students on May 5th, 2025, after years of development. As AMS physical, structural, digital, cultural, and organizational structures age, what are your plans for modernization within the AMS that aligns with student needs?
Sorry, good one second. We're laughing at each other. That's a really good question. I think that the revitalized JDEC is super important for the AMS to have a physical home here within Queen's University. I think having all of our departments scattered across campus, with the office being in LaSalle, and having multiple services run out of the Queen's Center or out of Rideau, it's nice to have almost every single service back underneath one roof, with the exception of Common Ground over in the Queen's Center, having them there. But having the brew here is so awesome. To update and modernize our online platforms and communication softwares and things like that, I think it's super important to listen to students and figure out exactly how they are consuming media and how they want to interact with the AMS. I think that's super important, not just saying, oh, we're going to do this because this is my idea. It's not the Alex McArthur Society, it is the Alma Mater Society. So really working with students to figure out exactly how they want to support their communications and understand how their infrastructure works. I think looking at other student unions and how they're a lot younger than ours, with us being the oldest student union here in Canada, I think that gives us some perks, but it also limits us in some ways. I think some of our traditions are awesome and great, but sometimes we just need to update and modernize ourselves, which is super important. So maybe looking at new ways of how our website can be designed so it's more accessible to students here on campus, or making sure that the way we're communicating is in a more modern way instead of long blogs, maybe short 90-second video content, because I guarantee I don't want to read something super long after a long day in class. I'd rather just scroll on my phone and watch a TikTok or an Instagram reel or something like that. So looking at ways not to completely reinvent the wheel, but maybe refine it just a little bit for our more modern times. Cars are going to be flying one day. Maybe we can fly together.
Thank you, Alex. We now give the floor to Dreyden. The JDUC was reopened to students on May 5th, 2025, after years of development. As AMS physical, digital, cultural, and organizational structures age, what are your plans for modernization within the AMS that aligns with student needs?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I will start off in order there. So I think for physical structure of modernizing for the AMS's need, or for students' needs from the AMS, I would bleed off into beyond just the JDUC there. I think while the JDUC does have a lot of advancements and improvements from it, I think largely Queen's University is a very inaccessible campus, so even trying to get to the JDUC in the first place might actually be inaccessible. Largely where this seems is trying to advance our mission around, again, my main pillar around affordability. I think the reality is we can't see increased engagement and transparency and desire for students to engage with the AMS if they can't actually be able to have the money post-rent and food costs to be able to attend events and actually not have to be able to have the free time to be able to do their academic curricular studying, but also enjoy the student experience and fully participate in it. So largely, I would want to be advancing the culture around the AMS in what our priorities are and goals. Additionally, around, you did mention culture advancement, I would say is majorly changing our tone around how we are managing our employees. Again, going back to that proactive communication for that pillar of transparency, I think that's really important to be able to build student trust and transparency in the long run, while also improving engagement. Additionally, would mention for digital, it would also still go around back to that website accessibility, making sure that we are advancing the website to actually be communicative of the entire AMS organization and building upon what the work has been done this year, as we've seen advancements of like additions of commission pages and things like that. But I think there's more resources, supports, and avenues that can be linked through the website as a central site. My approach to trying to advance the digital infrastructure of the AMS would be to try to diversify the AMS infrastructure. I think thinking one solution fits all is inappropriate for any of the departments for the AMS, as we have 21,000 students made of very different backgrounds, but also we have clubs and FactSocs also that rely on some of our digital infrastructure, things like Simply Voting and things like FormStack, and also Bounce, which was mentioned earlier. So I think making sure to really look at those and review them and how are they impacting students, clubs, and FactSocs, and how they can better be improved, and making sure if we are missing any digital infrastructure opportunities that we are expanding to those areas to make sure we can kind of reach every student in any corner that they would like. And lastly, around the structural advancements, I think really looking at our executive composition of how many executives we have. The AMS does have the least amount of executives incentives for its student government compared to the rest of Ontario, being as well also on a lower student fee. So I think really looking at how is this impacting senior management composition and executive structure composition to make sure that is it the most productive, or are we just hiring students to go into burnout, which is something we want to avoid. And as the president's office is overseen and correlates a lot with the HR office, I think that'd be something that'd be a priority to me to try to advance. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. All right. On to our final question. Leadership is often subject to scrutiny. How do you plan to handle criticism, particularly if you make a decision that isn't universally popular with the student body or internally within your AMS team? Do you want me to repeat it? Yeah. Sure. Leadership is often subject to scrutiny. How do you plan to handle criticism, particularly if you make a decision that isn't universally popular with the student body or internally within your AMS team?
Thank you for the question. I think first off is recognizing and honoring that everyone has an entitlement to their own feelings and opinions about any situation. And we, as a society of the AMS, but largely just as humans, we will always have disagreements, conversions, and areas where we might not align. I think majorly what I would commit to is making sure that you would know that I always am trying to stick to those 3 values that I'm trying to hold up to, which is affordability, transparency, and engagement, and also making sure that I would stick with the mission and values of the AMS that are established through the Assembly and its Constitution. Largely making sure that any decision that is disagreed upon is making sure to be open to also discuss the rationale behind that, and possibly, and always be open to redefining my opinion possibly, and also seeing if there's any changes in thoughts, especially as gathering more information. To avoid that, though, I think it's important to make sure when you're making tough decisions is do thorough research into the situation, making sure to understand the nuances and the different facets of student intersections that it could affect when it comes to a difficult situation or complex situation. Additionally, it would also be to respect everyone's feelings about not trying to misappropriate how they're feeling and what the situation is. Again, that transparency piece and proactive communication. I think it's important to show our challenges and successes as an organization, as that's what builds trust, not just trying to market necessarily as like a corporation solely on its like products. So I think that would be a major way I would approach it, is just understanding that everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Everyone is rightfully able to express that to the president and to the society through its processes. And the president should always be made available to hear disagreements and actually be wanting to discuss those disagreements. Because if everyone's thinking the same, that means that we're all insane. So we do not want groupthink. I think conversion is very important. Debate and discussion is going to produce the best outcomes. So I think relying on that and making sure to assure students that my rationale in all of my decisions, and also making sure I'm keeping in the back of my mind for all my decisions, is based in the mandate and the mission and the Constitution of the AMS, and with my values of affordability, transparency, and engagement. Yeah, I think I answered the question there.
Amazing. All right, Alex, same question for you. Leadership is often subject to scrutiny. How do you plan to handle criticism, particularly if you make a decision that isn't universally popular with the student body or internally within your AMS team?
Thank you for that question. I think the first way, if I make a mistake, I'm going to make mistakes. We're all human here. Sometimes we're going to make decisions that when it's first made, students are going to be upset. So I think the first part about doing that is my pillar of transparency. I think part of the thing that's been lacking with transparency is students aren't told why decisions have been made. They're just told that a decision has been made. So really informing students that this is why we had to make that decision, and understanding that sometimes you might not agree with that decision right now, but we're trying to make sure that the student experience here is beneficial for all students, not just this year, but 5 to 10 years down the line, I think is super important. I want to understand that, I understand that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and everyone's opinion is valid. We've all had very different lived experiences here, and we all bring something completely different to the table with completely different perspectives. So I think that's super important to understand as well. How we would go about handling those criticisms is understanding that they're here to make sure, students are here to hold me accountable, and the president accountable. So understanding that I may make a decision and I might have to reverse that decision if it's completely outrageous. If I say something like, let's burn down the JDUC and rebuild for insurance money, I probably shouldn't do that. But the students here need to understand that these are things that we should probably not do. And if they're saying, hey, don't do that, probably I should change my mind and fix my opinions on those things. But understanding that, hey, we're all student leaders here. We're all students, and that comes first, right? Understanding that mistakes do happen, but being able to be held accountable and not take that personal. We're here for a job as well as being student leaders as well. So making sure that we're understanding that, hey, at the end of the day, we're going to make mistakes. We're also here to learn from those mistakes as well, I think is super important as well.
Thank you for that, Alex. There will be no burning down of the JDUC. And thank you for answering our questions, candidates. We will now move on to closing statements. Alex, you may give us yours.
Firstly, I want to thank everybody coming out here tonight. I know people have popped in and out throughout the night, and I want to thank you for braving this treacherous weather outside. I remember when I woke up this morning, my roommate sent me the gif of being like, don't swim in the sea, like whatever that one, like you all probably know what I'm talking about. Like, don't take treacherous journeys and stuff like that, just because of how cold and how windy it was this morning. So that's, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and listening to all 4 of our campaigns and all of our pillars. I did mention something earlier that made a bunch of you laugh. That is, it's not going to be the Alex McArthur Society. It is going to be your alma mater society. I'm not here to lead and just push my own opinions and my own agendas. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to learn from students, and I'm here to lead effectively and as honestly as I can. I'm here to listen to students, and that kind of builds into my 3 pillars of representation, collaboration, and transparency. Firstly, with representation, I feel like as part of the president's job, they are here to represent the opinion of students here on campus. So making sure that students feel like they are being represented as appropriately as possible. Going back to students and saying, hey, this is what we've been doing. This is what the AMS is working towards. Do you agree with this? How do you think we can change our approach for this? Or should we completely scrap this and go to something else? So by holding office hours and town halls and multiple questionnaires and plebiscite questions to truly understand how the president's office can best represent those opinions of students is, I think, a necessity here as we move forward here on campus, not just at the end of the year with the outgoing teams sending a questionnaire and then a halfway through the year questionnaire, doing it quarterly, doing it through the summer to ask first year's opinions exactly how they want their AMS to advocate for them as well once they come in here. Again, that'll help boost engagement with the AMS because students' first interactions with the university might be that email saying, hey, fill out this questionnaire for what you want your student government to advocate for. The secondly being collaboration. I think that every student group here on campus is working towards making Queens a better place for all students. So we shouldn't be fighting against each other and go completely separate ways to end up at the same goal. We should be working together with faculty societies and DSCs and department clubs and things like, and discipline clubs and all those other groups that we can work with to make sure that Queens not only is a better place for students, but provide better programming for students as well here on campus. And lastly, my last pillar of transparency, I think that students deserve to know exactly how their money is being spent and the decisions that are being made on behalf of them at an AMS level and a university level as well. So that comes down to marketing and explaining exactly why we're making those decisions and why we had to make this decision so we can better make Queens a better place, not just for you right now, but for students down the line as well. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, and I hope you do all get home safe. Please use walk home if needed. We're all here to make sure we get through this kind of polar vortex together. So yeah, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Alex. Now, Dreyden's closing statements, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much. First, I want to thank everyone for coming today. I also want to make sure to close off with a reminder that I do really hope, if elected, to lead with resilience, passion, and determination for student outcomes, and also a dedication to the AMS's mission, mandate, and student needs. I think also I believe I will be best fit to lead this role as with my experiences and my abilities to deliver on ambitious goals within previous years and roles at the AMS, but also outside of this organization. And I really hope to earn your vote on the pillars of affordability, transparency, and engagement. I think within affordability, we do need an AMS that is working to save students time and money. Largely, as we've seen from a recent journal article, Queens' 2-bedroom rates as of last year have gone up by 28.9% and have now made Kingston the 4th most expensive housing market in Canada. This is why it's important that every table we have with the Board of Trustees, the Senate, and the principal and other admin alike, we are advocating on affordability while also making sure to work with the other their executives to implement an organization-wide loyalty and benefits program to better improve student loyalty and incentivize rewards for commonly used student services that oftentimes are already used each day, but also in addition to that, working externally with common frequently used services for students to negotiate MOUs, sponsorship deals, or more importantly, discounts and benefits for every student and or club in FACSOC. With transparency, where proactive communication is seen as building student trust and transparency, I think, again, going back to investing into the Internal Affairs Office is super important to make sure that we can adequately provide our governance processes, while also making sure to be proactively communicating and setting that tone with our senior management and AMs and down there. Additionally, for transparency is the website accessibility and making sure we're providing better financial information and strategic plan information like our goal plans and long-term strategic plans and what committee work we're doing at a governance level is available on the website and a bit more transparent, but also being communicated and promoted with marketing offices and internal affairs office collaborations. With engagement, I also do think it's important to build student community through connection. So with that will be working and trying to secure with the VPUA candidate a third-party event company so that we can try to provide these larger scale events and improve on harm reduction while advocating to the university on the alcohol policy. Additionally, I want to, before closing off, you can all find my campaign information and learn more about some of the actionables I'm going to be planning on doing at Dre for Prez on Instagram. And I also want to make sure and take a sincere appreciation and opportunity for being allowed to attend this debate. I want to sincerely appreciate Alex for being open to attending this as well and being the opponent in this race, and it's been really great to run for. And also thank the other candidates for their debate question answers. Additionally, I want to thank the Internal Affairs Office for scheduling this event today and making sure to plan it. And I want to thank every student who's come in and out or online to be able to attend, and every student who's going to be voting in this upcoming election. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your answers, Dreyden. We'd like to thank all candidates on behalf of civic officers, and I will now hand it to Rachel.
Hello again, everyone. So we're now going to move on to the audience question period. Can we get the next slide, please? Okay, perfect. So we're first going to start off with a question from Rector Nikki Boychuk-Hale for the VPUA. For the president, sorry. My bad, my apologies. So the AMS president provides a report and gives an oral speech to the Board of Trustees quarterly. What approach will you take that's different from the status quo when interacting with the board? Both presidential candidates, yes. It would be Alex goes first, and every answer is going to be 2 minutes each.
I'll go like this. I want to thank Rector Boychuk-Hale for that question. I think that they have a very unique position in interacting with the Board of Trustees, a little bit more than the president does as a elected member to the Board of Trustees and a voting member on that as well. I think that my approach to interacting with the members of the Board of Trustees is treating them as people. They aren't these scary guys or gals or people who are hidden behind a name or a face or anything like that. They are people with their own lives and their own experiences and have their own unique perspectives on their own decision-making process and how they decide to vote on specific matters. So really understanding that they are people too, and a lot of them are alumni from the university, and a lot of them also are staff with the university as well. So understanding that they have their own unique perspectives, and they all have their own ways of interacting with students here on campus as well. So understanding that they not only are people, but they also are people that we can work with and people who want to make Queens a better place. So understanding that they're not here to necessarily impact, harm students, but make sure that the student perspective is always in their thought in their decision-making process, as the president isn't a voting member on the Board of Trustees, making sure that they are able to push the position of the AMS and push the position of undergraduate students here on campus to make sure that those voices are heard throughout all of their decision-making processes, and making sure that we're able to work in a very positive and holistic relationship with the Board of Trustees.
Okay, so the question again was, the AMS president provides a report and gives an oral speech to the Board of Trustees quarterly. What approach will you take that's different from the status quo when interacting with the board?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the approach I would take is making sure to be very tactical with how we are going to the board. Seeing beyond that, we can do more than just report to the board and provide a report on some of the concerns of students. Of course, that is a very important avenue, but also seeing the Board of Trustees as an opportunity to try to get our advocacy goals done through appropriate mutual beneficial relationship expansion with the Board of Trustees members. And specifically, when we have certain concerns under certain committees' responsibilities, we should be going to reach out to those trustee members on those committees, trying to meet with them and see how we can get them to the side of the student opinion, and making sure that the Board of Trustees does have an awareness of the nuances and the complexities of concerns for students, and making sure that they're not voting on these issues blindly without knowing students' concerns. Additionally, I would say is making sure to remember the role of the president and the role of the AMS, which is to advocate for students. So understanding that while those admin are there for a job as well, and respecting that they are, as Alex mentioned, people. I have a job as well if elected president, and also as a person, but also making sure that I stick by that duty to represent for students, whether it's pleasurable to the admin's ear or not necessarily, but also making sure to deliver it in a way that is understanding, where the admin can see that it is understanding that these are students' concerns, and this isn't necessarily me trying to have a sword fight or a laser battle, but it's more so trying to actually achieve the common goal, which is trying to see students have the most success and support here at university and have the best experience. And that although we might disagree on certain things, I think that there's ways that the student government, the AMS, and my role, if elected, the role through president, can do to try to better address those without necessarily just conceding to all of the university's demands or opinions, but making sure we're sticking by the integrity of what the students' concerns and desires are for the university. And I would finish off with also making sure that obviously anywhere we do agree with the university, to make sure fully utilize the productivity of that and try to get as much out of it.
Thank you, guys. We will be moving on to a question for the VP Ops. This is a student question. So, as someone who has worked for a long time, and since the first year, like you said, how were you able to access your job opportunities? And how would you improve it, especially for first-year students who would like to start building their careers and skills within the Queens community?
That is an amazing, amazing question. I think that I come from a unique perspective because I do pay for my own schooling, so it wasn't an option for me to get a student job in first year. In fact, in first year, I couldn't get a student job. I applied for work study, and I wasn't able to get any work study jobs. They're very limited here on campus for those who aren't familiar with that. So I actually had to find a job off campus. I worked in a pharmacy as a pharmacy assistant. And then my positions in second and third year, again, they were also very, very difficult to obtain. And this past year, when I became kind of initiated into the AMS, I came across the job positions on a whim. Like many other students, I lacked the exposure to what the AMS can offer, and I think that is a super, super important piece, especially with our first-year incoming students. One thing that I've been telling all the students that come up to my booth, because a lot of them don't really know what the AMS is, and the one thing I really emphasize is the availability of student jobs here on campus. There are so many student jobs available in the AMS, and students can't access them because they're not educated, they're not aware. So I think that really improving that education and accessibility piece, I think that Again, with the 200% increase in student engagement in AMS marketing and communications is huge, but there's always room for improvement. So going to orientation events and really collaborating with the first years. I don't want to come off as just this hierarchical figure who's throwing speeches at you. I really want to create a collaborative environment where students feel like they can come, as some of my other candidates have mentioned, having regular office hours, just creating an open environment where students can get the information that they really need.
Thank you so much, Avery. Now, finally, again, moving on to VPUA, we have an anonymous submission. So this question says, with the ORT mystery concert discontinued and only a promise of an AMS concert in its place, what concrete steps will you take to ensure the new concert is actually delivered and sustained in future years?
Thank you so much to whoever submitted that question. It's been on the mind of countless students, and I've heard it time and time again in my conversations. Where is the concert? My first plan and step to figuring that out is learning from those who have done it successfully. I think the AMS looks up to Western a lot of times. In their successful concert this year, they had Noah Khan. It was very well received, and I think there's lots to learn from there, talking about how our budgets compare to one another, potentially collaborations as well. There's been talks about how we can attract larger scale audience performers and entertainers by incentivizing them, doing like, oh, you can come and perform in London, then in Hamilton, then in Kingston. This enables us, through a collaborative approach, a more realistic attraction of performers that students actually want to see. I think as well, with expanding beyond just orientation concert and having it as an AMS-wide concert, there's lots of opportunities to work with the city and the mayor and the city councilors to figure out how this can also support the city and how we can collaborate on our resources. There are lots of great venues in Kingston, lots of people who I think would, really enjoy spending time and building that community here, especially since we are a non-commuter university. Like Dreyden mentioned as well, there's also been talks about, sourcing for a third-party service to help us plan these really large-scale events without compromising our quality. And I think these are just a few of the things. I think lots is unknown at the moment, but starting these conversations early within my transitionary period is a huge step forward to seeing something come for the next year.
Thank you so much, Edward. Moving right along, we have yet another submission for both presidential candidates. So, Dreyden, you're up first. Planning and executing AMS Assembly is a major responsibility of the Internal Affairs Office, which falls under the President's portfolio. What experience do you have with AMS Assembly, and how will that experience guide your approach to Assembly?
Yeah, so I can't remember how many assemblies I've attended. I actually attended my first assembly in 2022 of October and have been to nearly every single one unless another commitment has blocked me from it. That's because I have been given the opportunity to serve as commissioner for 3 years and then chair of the board, all capacities that report to the assembly. So I think I'll give a perspective of what it is to be a reporting worker to assembly and trying to make sure to understand FactSocs. And I really wanted to make sure at my time as commissioner and how I'd see it in president is that there's a role of commissioners that they aren't elected, but they are there to serve the mission and the mandate of that specific department or office, and then that the FactSocs and the executives who are elected should be influencing the political and educational direction of them. So largely when that comes to the Internal Affairs Office and the Assembly, I would say that I would use my experience and obviously knowing how to, as this past year, I was the one that planned the corporate special general meeting and also expanded the types of presentations that we did at that meeting to make sure that it was more transparent to students, the different things that the board was doing. I would look at the same approach with the Assembly, again, going back to that transparency and properly investing into the resources into the Internal Affairs Office for them to be able to have the time and capacity to be able to deliver certain extra transparency around through more caucuses, town halls, committee consultation formats, and ways for them to get engaged with the assembly, again, back to collaborating with the marketing and communications office. I think that goes back also to making sure we have adequate policy compliant communication. An example of that is making sure that when we're calling special assemblies or corporate general meetings or any assembly, that the proper communication formats are provided, working with the journal, working with our marketing office, and making sure that we're getting the information out there so that students aren't caught off guard, and they're also just to be able to be just as prepared as their FACSOC members around the information, while also being able to reach out to the Internal Affairs Office and through President supporting that effort for them to be able to reach out on questions and inquiries that might not have as much context as the FACSOC presidents.
Hello? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dreyden. Now, Alex, it's your turn to take the stage. I will repeat the question. So, planning and executing AMS Assembly is a major responsibility of the Internal Affairs Office, which falls under the President's portfolio. What experience do you have with AMS Assembly, and how will that experience guide your approach to Assembly?
Absolutely. So I've never actually sat as a member of Assembly, unlike Dreyden, but I have experienced many assemblies since I've been here at Queen's as a student, just attending AMS Assembly. So I think that is a very unique perspective. Recently, since I've been a student, agendas aren't communicated on time to students, things like that. So really supporting that the team there, ensuring that students, general students here on campus feel like they are able to understand exactly what's going on in a timely manner instead of just maybe the day of or a couple hours before, having access to that information so that they're able to go to their faculty societies and say, hey, I really don't like what this motion, or I don't like what this person said in their report. Are you able to bring something up on my behalf? I think is super important. So really supporting the Internal Affairs Office to make sure policy is adhered to and making sure that Assembly is not an exciting place for students to come to. I know that there's been very exciting assemblies in my time, and there's also been assemblies where I'm probably falling asleep to because they draw on too long. So continuing with assemblies being bi-weekly and ensuring that they're not super long and super boring so students want to attend, and making sure that they feel like they are able to be heard at those assemblies is super important.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question for both VPOPs and VPUA candidates. So first I'd like to invite Avery to the podium. So the question goes, many students aren't aware that services and or commissions are provided by the AMS, in part to their brand autonomy. Do you have any plans to better connect the AMS name to these services/commissions?
Okay, yes, I do have a plan. So definitely the marketing and communications, we've seen an improvement this year, as I've mentioned a few times. And one thing that I really like that the AMS is implementing, for example, all the services, for the most part, have the _AMS in their Instagram Instagram username. I think that that's really important to increase visibility. And then again, one of my pillars is actually collaborations. And as I've mentioned in one of my answers in the questions earlier, is improving collaborations between AMS services, specifically to give visibility to the smaller services. And I think that a big piece of that is incentivizing using AMS services. These collaborations can really expand our perspective of what even an event or collaboration can even look like, but also incentivizing using services compared to our competitors. Why come to Society 58 when we have Oil Thigh Design? Why come to Queen's Pub when you can go to Brass? So one thing that I've been talking about with some of my other candidates is in implementing some sort of rewards system. So that would definitely in itself, if it's connected to your student card, that could itself really improve the visibility of the AMS brand as a whole. And also not only that, but improve revenue and really work towards making the AMS known to all students from first year to fourth year.
Thank you so much, Avery, for that answer. I'd like to invite Edward up to the podium. I will repeat the question, so don't worry. Many students aren't aware that services and or commissions are provided by the AMS, in part due to their brand autonomy. Do you have any plans to better connect the AMS name to these services/commissions?
Yes. I've got 4 ideas right here. Firstly, around the Instagram. So I've had a chat and consultations with the current marketing director, Nathan, about where the direction is. You know, are we going to be combining all the commissions into one Instagram? What is our strategic plan, and how can we best incorporate student feedback in there as well? We've been looking at other universities such as Western, which has separated their main student union page into one central one and then an events one. And that has enabled a lot more streamlined approaches where if students are looking for events, they can find them there. I find that looking at the AMS page right now, it's very convoluted. There's so many posts going up every day that we get that fatigue. Another thing as well that kind of adds on to that is also providing more strategy within the commissioners early on within their year around marketing, especially as it pertains to educational campaigns or events. I think a lot gets lost when everyone's posting around the same time, or especially, you know, end of December, end of April, when we want to push out as much information as possible. Being more strategic in our goals and in how we present ourselves enables us to better educate our students on key issues such as Bill 33 or resources for housing insecurity. I think another idea or kind of thing to address that is, or another consideration we have to make is that some of the commissions don't want to be associated with the AMS. It's a large cultural thing that we have here where, you know, specifically equity deserving students don't want to approach services, commissions, offices that are labeled as AMS. So to address how we want to associate or brand everything under the AMS, we need to first address that mistrust. So doing deep consultations with students, for example, from the Black community, Indigenous community, queer community as well, so that we can rebuild that trust and that students see AMS and want to go there.
Thank you very much, Edward. I'd like to bring back the president candidates to the podium. We have one final question. Alex would be first. So this final question kind of plays into what we just asked the VPOPs and VPUA. So faculty orientation plays an integral role in shaping the transition of over 5,000 incoming students at Queen's University. In terms of orientation roundtable, how you plan on supporting this portfolio to ensure its success?
I want to thank whichever student did provide that question. I think it's a very important question, as orientation is usually the first experience that a student may have with the university here on campus. With summer orientation moving online with the university doing that, I think it's super important that these students feel like they're able to have a safe and welcoming environment to experience their first few days here at Queen's. In terms of supporting the orientation roundtable office, I think it's super important that we let them be able to support the faculty societies while providing mentorship and guidance in those key decision making, as well as facilitating those conversations with the university. At the end of the day, the orientation roundtable facilitates the university's orientation. So keeping that in mind and understanding that the university is just going to have some things that we may not agree with, but we have to follow those rules to provide orientation here at Queen's. So understanding that, while also understanding that the faculty societies and their fac heads and their logistics coordinators play a key role in supporting the orientation roundtable itself. So developing those key relationship with those fac heads and the faculty society presidents, or whichever individual supports their own orientation team, is able to feel like they're heard and that we're understanding that the concerns or challenges that they may be facing, to make sure that they're able to execute their own orientation for their own specific faculty that students that will enjoy. as someone who's read and reviewed a bunch of different event forms, those are long, maybe working with the university to help synthesize those so that when they get to orientation, they aren't backlogged for 2 weeks to edit those down and send them back and all those back and forth things. So really streamlining communications with the faculty societies and the university to really make sure that not only the orientation roundtable is supported, but also the faculty societies themselves are supported as well. Thank you so much tonight. I know this is my last question, so I want to say thank you all for coming out.
Dreyden, I'd like to invite you to the podium now. So to reiterate the question, faculty orientation plays an integral role in shaping the transition of over 5,000 incoming students at Queen's University. In terms of orientation roundtable, how will you plan on supporting this portfolio to ensure its success?
Perfect. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for whoever submitted that. I think a major thing is much kind of reiterating what I said for the Secretariat is understanding to be a support resource for the ORT director, but also making sure to work with FACSOCs on understanding their full concerns around orientation. One of the big things is around the FACSOC service agreement and year-to-year transition and jurisdiction and consistency and being able to adequately transition that over across all the FACSOCs and the incoming executive. So one of the things I lay out in my actionables for transparency is a FACSOC service agreement reference guide for the incoming year to have a transitionary doc to also be complementary towards the understandings that FACSOCs like NSS have an off election year from the regular AMS year, but also that complications can come up with executives possibly having to leave their roles and things, and so we should have the resources in place to allow for an ORT to still be smooth and continuous. Additionally, the same thing can be said for the internal ORT office. I think it's making sure to have the procedures, SOPs, and reference guides in place to make sure that if the ORT team or anything changes within it, the supports and contacts and resources being able to provide for the FACSOCs orientations are still consistent and proficient. I would build off of that to continue with that as the president. It would be to coordinate with the VPUA, the Campus Affairs Commission, and other portfolios that are relevant during ORT, during high activity periods, things like event sanctioning and things like grant dispersals and stuff like that for FACSOCs are important that are given under the ORT office. But also making sure we're looking at our policies around things like our student experience bursary and stuff, and making sure that it's fully complementable to all the ORT activities that happen on campus. And ensuring as well, making sure that we're breaking the bottlenecks between the FACSOCs and the ORT team during that really dense period, especially leading into the beginning of September and those last couple months of summer. There's oftentimes a lot of, and just purely because it's so busy and hectic, that there's an increased probability of lost communication. So we should be improving that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dreyden. That will be the end of our audience question period. So I'd like to thank all our candidates for coming out today and everyone for assisting our debate night tonight. Can we switch to the next slide? Can we switch to the next slide, please? Anyways, thank you, everyone. Please vote January 28th to January 30th, and come to our elections reveal night at the Queen's Pub, 6 p.m. on January 31st to see who your new election candidates will be, or executives will be. But everyone, have a great night and get home safe. Thank you so much for coming.